Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon from wherever you are joining us. I know in as much as this webinar is being hosted by the Kenya Network Information Center, we have colleagues joining from all corners of the world. So welcome. To those that have managed to join in good time. Just a quick comment. If you want to ask a question, Zoom has the Q and, or rather, we have the Q&A pod. Kindly post your questions there and they can be answered on the fly. As we move along. Kindly note that this session is being recorded just for purposes of complying with the Data Protection Act. My name is Barak Otieno. I am the manager of Africa Top Level Domains Organization, the regional association of country called Top Level Domain Registries on the African continent. And I have an eminent panel. We may not be as gender diverse, but I can assure all of you that behind the scenes, we are very gender compliant. But we will endeavor going forward to make sure that the panel looks much better than it is today. So today on the panel, I have Joel Karobio, who is our host. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Network Information Center. I have Bob Ochieng, the manager for stakeholder engagement from the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, basically covering the Eastern and Southern, generally just the African continent as well. We have our colleague David Njuki from the Africa Network Information Center, the regional internet registry for the African region, but most importantly, again, a Kenyan like us. We are proud of him. We have Sam Oduor from Internet Solutions, the Cybersecurity Division, and that's the panel that we do have for today. So without further ado, may I request that even as we engage in this webinar, whenever you would like to speak, please raise your hand or use the Q&A pod. Again, ensure your microphone is muted at all times if you are not speaking. And wherever you need to speak, raise your hand so that then we can be able to give you an opportunity to speak. But having said that, I would like to give my panelists 1 or 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Just your names, the organization you represent, and then I'll come back to you when we start the webinar proper with the discussion and the question that we have for the day. So I will start with our host, Joel Karobio. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Barak, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our esteemed audience today. My name is Joel Karobio. I am the CEO of Kenya Network Information Center, otherwise known as KeNIC, and I'm glad to be hosting you today. Thank you very much, Barak.
Thank you very much, Joel. I will now move to Sam Oduor. Sam, kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Barak, for having me. As you said, my name is Sam Oduor. I represent Internet Solutions. I'm from the Cybersecurity Division, and looking forward to a productive communication and sharing knowledge in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. David?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I am David Njuki. I'm representing AFRINIC, the Africa Network Information Center. Thank you, Barak, for inviting me to this panel. I'm looking forward to discussing all matters DNS. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And finally, Bob.
Thank you very much, Barak. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Bob Ochieng, as has been said. And today, here on behalf of ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And I am from the Global Stakeholder Engagement Team for Africa. Looking forward to an incisive debate and discussions and questions from the audience. Asante, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. So, colleagues, I would like again to welcome any participants that may just be joining us right now. Today, we are discussing the impact of the domain name system on the digital economy. Most of you, especially for the Kenyan citizens, you know how reliant we have become on the internet. And for most of us, we use the internet, but we really don't pay attention to the goings on behind the scenes or on the internet. And sometimes we underutilize what I would like to refer to as the internet value chain because we may not understand the potential that is available to us on the internet. Let me put it that way. So the purpose of this webinar is basically to break down what the domain name system is. We will try as much as possible, taking cognizance of the fact that there could be many of us that are not technical or do not have a technical background on this webinar, to simplify the conversation as much as possible. So my eminent panel is going to break down the domain name system, basically some of the commonly used terminology, what are the components of the domain name system, and some of the key concepts. And then we will look at how we can be able to take advantage of some of the statistics that the domain name system presents to us for economic purposes. We are also going to examine what a country called top-level domain registry is and other top-level domain registries, and basically how they work, and basically how we can utilize the domain name system in a secure way, taking into consideration the legal regime within which we exist. So the panel that we have here is going to assist us to achieve that. And let me say, before I open the floor and hand over to my panelists, that largely, in as much as the internet was not invented in the global south and in the African countries where we are found, that does not mean that we cannot leverage the internet for social and economic benefit. For those that follow DNS economics, you realize that the so-called big tech, whether it is Facebook, whether it is Amazon, whether it is Google, to name a few, most of these are relying or depending on the domain name system. So to bring the idea a bit home, I think in the African continent, we are always on the menu. We are always being consumed. We are not a part of the equation where money is being made, but we are consumers of goods and services, and largely because we do not understand how this domain name system operates. So I think at the end of this webinar, I would implore all our participants that we need to move from the menu to sit on the table with the big players. I think we cannot only have one organization, in this case I'm referring to Safaricom, being mentioned because of inventions across the world. We can do better, we can do more, taking advantage of the internet, which is a global superhighway. So even as we discuss, we want to look at how best we can understand the domain name system and by extension, the internet value chain, so that we can also be key players. It doesn't make sense that in a country of more than 45 million citizens, we just have 100,000 domain names registered. So where are we doing our business online? That's the biggest question that I will post to our participants at this point in time. The last census showed that we only have about 3 million e-commerce users in the Republic of Kenya, yet we call ourselves a Silicon Savannah. Are we really a Silicon Savannah? So it seems that maybe we are good in the news or on paper, but on ground things are really different. So to my panelists, even as we engage in this conversation, as we break down the technical issues, I would like us to really focus on the economics of the domain name system so that we really move from the menu and we come to the table so that we can compete with the big tech, the other key players. So without further ado, I will turn to my colleague Bob Ochieng, who works at the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, basically the steward of the global naming and numbering resources for the internet, to just break down for us what is the domain name system in layman's language. Bob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barak. And you've given such a detailed introduction, touching on critical components of the discussion today. You mentioned something interesting, that the internet has indeed a value chain. And if you opened up the internet and looked at it, deeply, you can actually extract, different components and extrapolate it. And most of the time, what we know as, the majority or forming the major part of our digital economy is not what we hear about. Now, one of the areas that is very silent and rarely, discussed is what we call the domain name system. Of course, there are other, micro chains within the digital economy, from fintech, to, other technologies to medical technologies. The domain name system is one of them. But what is the domain name system? If you take a step back and look at this thing we call the internet, you'll realize that it is a network of networks. There is no single network somewhere that we call the internet. What we call the internet is the holistic hundreds of thousands of different autonomous networks that seemingly to all of us in our interaction with it looks and works like one network. But we know that it is not even a device or one device. That network has hundreds and thousands, in fact billions of other devices connected to it. So how do you move from one device to another, or how do you access a resource in that very huge complex scenario? For you to create sanity and for you to find your way in such a network, you need to identify these devices or these resources. Now, one of the ways to do this, and which has been widely deployed today, is what we call the domain name system. So for you to access a particular resource, or for you to be identified in this huge network of networks, you need something called a unique number, which, as my other colleagues will define later on, is called an IP address. But IP addresses, as you'll notice, are very long in nature or in their notation. And the human mind, naturally finds it very difficult to remember numbers. If you have a phone book with hundreds of numbers stored in it, every time when you want to call somebody, you actually just look for that person's name, not the number, and you will call the name. But your phone does not call the name, your phone calls the number. And so is the internet. So when you write, kbc.go.ke or kenic.or.ke or afrinic.net, what the system actually looks up is the number that hosts Afrinic content or KeNIC's content. But because the number is so long, you can't remember it, you use a name. So the system that maps these names to the respective unique numbers is what we call the domain name system. And this happens behind the scenes without your knowledge, but it is precisely to make our work as human beings easier to remember where we want to go. So if I want to go to Facebook, I don't have to remember the IP address of where Facebook is. I only need to remember the name Facebook. So the domain name system makes it possible for us to uniquely identify content and resources online that would have been ordinarily very difficult for a human being to remember. I'm sure my colleagues will add on to this, but in a very high level, this is why the DNS system or the domain name system for the long of it is so important to us. I think going down in the discussion, we'll also realize that the domain name system is not only helping us perform and navigate the internet, hence performing a technical role, but the domain name system also has a massive business and commercial opportunity, and we look at that in detail. Thank you, Barak.
Thank you very much, Bob. I will come back to you, especially given the role that the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers plays, just to get a sneak preview of where exactly the business is. But I want to turn to David Njuki from Afrinic, just to tell us, first of all, introduce the Africa Network Information Center to us. What is the value of the regional internet registry? And do you think, given Kenya is in the African region, we are taking advantage of the numbering resources as we should for social and economic development? So David, over to you.
Thank you, Barak, for the introduction. So yes, let me first commend Bob on that nice breakdown. I really like the phone book analogy when explaining the domain name system. So I work for Afrinic. Afrinic is a regional registry for internet numbers. What does this mean? The way Bob says he's with ICANN, he's dealing with the domain. There is the other part of the numbers. Bob was mentioning about names. You go to your phone book, I find your name. But you see, they're supposed to be other bodies which deal with the number side of things. On the number side of things now, we are looking at IP addresses. So our organizations, we manage the IP addresses for the African region. The way the internet works as a network of networks, and some questions always arise, like who owns the internet? They say it's an autonomous system, because you'd encounter people saying, okay, but who owns it? Nobody really owns the internet. It just thrives in its own ecosystem. So as Afrinic, what we're responsible for is assigning these numbers to the African region. What does this mean? We have that responsibility whereby an organization like Safaricom is our member. They come to us, we need IP addresses so as to go to the internet, because someone has to manage those resources. So Afrinic has that responsibility, because the numbers have to be managed by someone. So on the region, we do manage IPs, and there's another part of the internet called the autonomous, the ASNs, autonomous system numbers. So you can get that IP, but how do you go from one IP to another? So the way networks work. So we also manage those kinds of resources in that sense. I don't want to go into a lot of technical bits. I want to simplify things as much as possible. So on the role of the value, Barak, I would say that as you had mentioned earlier, of Africa, for us always going outside. I think the role we play as a body, we are well placed in the region, because we are allowed to manage these resources. So in a sense, we have this kind of ownership in the region. So we try to get involved with different stakeholders to emphasize on how to use these resources and its role on the internet. I hope I'm clear there.
Thank you very much, David. I will quickly shift to Joel Karubiu, the CEO of the Kenya Network Information Center, to give us a sneak preview on the domain name system from a local perspective. Of course, the Kenya Network Information Center being the local internet registry. Joel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barak. And thank you to Bob and David for just sort of like setting the stage. So our role as KeNIC is basically when Bob and David are thinking about country codes, they ask each country, which country code do you want to have? And in Kenya, we are synonymous with .ke. We use .ke for anything that we do across the country. So our country code known globally is KE. So in that way, then even in the domain name space, .ke is the name that, or the code that we use. So KeNIC has been mandated to manage that country code to ensure that that country code is available for the citizens of Kenya who are looking for a gateway to the internet. So they are looking for a way to be online. And one of the ways to look at it is actually to have a domain name. Now to the audience and to the people we're talking to, naturally, we've seen that as we are growing up, we were asked at different points in our lives to develop an email address. So when we were younger, we would take our nicknames, which we used in school, and that's what we used. Over time, then you left school and now you had to go into the workforce, or you had to go into university and you needed another email address. Obviously, most of us then took up Gmail as our email address. Why was that? Because it's a free email that you can get. But now when we move to more professionalism and ensuring that you're actually getting to be known and your identity on the internet, there come the domain names now. And there comes that unique identifier that you must find, which in this case for our country, we recommend that you use .ke as your unique identifier. What does this do for you? It ensures that one, anywhere in the world, someone knows who you are and which country you're coming from. So for example, if you're setting up a business today and you put a .com email, someone out there in the world may be looking for you, but they may not know which country, they might reach you, but they may not know exactly which country you're operating from. But if you had a .ke as your extension, then someone is able to know. So for example, if someone was to go to the internet and Google KBC, our national broadcaster, so they're looking, so usually a Google search or an internet search would be TV stations in Kenya. Now, when you type TV stations in Kenya, most likely the TV stations that have a .ke would appear first within your search engine. This is because then you've localized your search to Kenya. But if someone just went and did an internet search on TV stations, then you'd find TV stations across the world. But people are becoming more specific in terms of their search, and they're asking specific questions. So with those specific ones, you have to optimize yourself to be able to be part of that optimization that they're asking for. So KeNIC, our mandate is first, we operate as the registry for Kenya. Now, Bob has given a very good analogy around numbers and names. So I'll come back to that analogy. So you have a phone, your phone has, depending on how well known you are, you probably have more than 200 numbers on your phone. What do you do with that number? So instead of me memorizing Barak's number, I put Barak. And I put Barak and maybe even add an extension so that I can remember who Barak is. So I'll say Barak Otieno of AFTLD, for example. Now, the number at the back is what you've converted into a name. So it's the same case within the internet. So on the internet, you're given a series of numbers. But then because of the aspect of being able to remember this, you then are given a name, or you choose a name that is associated with those numbers. So for example, KeNIC has probably a number 192 something, something, something. But since you cannot remember that, then we've given it the name kenic.or.ke. So that if someone was to search registries in Kenya, they don't need to put a number, they just type registries in Kenya, and KeNIC should appear. So the domain name space actually just allows an easier way for you to be identified within the internet and ensuring that people know who you are. So I will come back. I think Barak will allow us to come back and just discuss the benefits of why the .k is better than others and what are the safeguards that we've also put in place. But in a nutshell, KeNIC is the Sharia house or the home of domain names. And if you wanted to search for domain name, that is the one place where the database for the country is held. Thank you, Barak.
Thank you very much, Joel. Indeed, I'll come back to you. I want to quickly transition to Sam Oduor, who is basically dealing with businesses and home users from a day-to-day basis, connecting them online. So Sam, from a cybersecurity standpoint, how secure is the domain name system, either locally and or within the region? And when you talk about security, what are we referring to on the domain name system?
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you so much, Barak. When you speak about security holistically, it's the same traditional security that we apply. I mean, if you look at your home, you have a security guard, and you also have your door, and probably you've set up an alarm so that if anyone enters without authorization, you will be alerted. To explain this better, just allow me to talk about DNS once again. I know we've all explained it in different ways. Since 1968, that is the birth of the internet, that's about 52 years ago, the DNS has been at the epicenter of the growth of the internet. And if I may say one thing, if the internet was a song, then the DNS was going to be the highest pitch in that. Because without the DNS, we basically don't have the internet enabling. And like in any marketplace, we have people who've come to do business. And we have people also who've come to steal from the people who are doing business. So this brings about the aspect of security, of what role does DNS play when security is being discussed. Now, we all remember in 2013, google.co.ke, hotmail.co.ke, and also microsoft.co.ke were hacked. And if you look at this holistically, it meant that anyone who was going to visit google.co.ke was either going to present their personally identifiable information if they were to log in on that. So DNS plays a very important role in security in the sense that it is everything. And by everything, I mean that you cannot conduct business without DNS. So you need to think about the e-commerce platforms that we have. You need to think about the apps that are relying on the DNS and any other thing that depends on DNS for security, for transaction. So there are a couple of DNS-based attacks. And the common one, like what happened in 2013, was what we called domain name hijacking. And there are others like DNS flood attack. And there's also DNS amplification attack, which is some form of denial of service. And there's also cache poisoning. And if we go more into technical terms that I will try to demystify later, you will find there are things like DNS tunneling attacks and random subdomain attacks. So in most cases, people who have domains need to ensure that they are secured. And by this, I mean, they need to look at every aspect of their provider, and while registering domains, present the questions to their providers like, what sort of security do you offer? In 2013, it wasn't Google that was hacked. It wasn't Microsoft that was hacked. It was a DNS system somewhere. that was hacked. And solely the name, the ISP, or what we call the registrar, is in charge of this kind of ensuring that these kind of platforms are secure. Now, there are other aspects of security that come into play. There's what we call cyber trenching, and I'll be explaining that in a bit. And there are forms of attack whereby if you are having an organization, you receive an email. Let's say you've registered something like KeNIC.or.ke. You receive an email from a stranger on the internet that, hey, look here, there's this domain KeNICKenya.or.ke that we are going to be selling. Someone has approached that and they want to buy it. And what ramification does this have to your brand? I mean, if someone was to send to somebody an email from KeNICKenya.or.ke, they will definitely assume that this is a legitimate email coming from a legitimate entity. And they could ask you maybe to renew your domain, or they could ask you probably to buy something like a certificate for your domain. And in the essence, you're going to lose money. So cybersecurity is a major concern in the DNS space, because DNS technically is the epicenter of the internet. I recall back in 2005, we were having a conversation with my friend, who is a network engineer. And he told me, you know, we can switch off the DNS servers and we'll still have on the internet. And I didn't want to prove that. Then fortunately or unfortunately, there was a glitch that affected the DNS system, and all the internet collapsed at that point of time. So this tells you how DNS security needs to be at the epicenter of the internet whenever you are talking about anything. You have to ensure that the DNS system is available. You have to be ensured that it is integral, and you have to ensure that confidentiality exists within that environment.
Thank you very much, Sam, for really breaking down the security aspects of the DNS in a very palatable manner. I'll come back to you with respect to what you consider some of the common attacks on small and medium enterprises and home users. For a country like Kenya, where we are based, and which is the focus of our conversation, almost 70% of the economy is Kadogo economy, the small shops, the side hustles, and the businesses that people are doing from home. So I'll be very curious to know, based on your, I know you've been very humble not to mention the fact that you are also one of our experts at the KESAT, which basically monitors security incidents on the internet in Kenya. Probably from a KESAT perspective, what you may have observed that some of the most common attacks to small and medium enterprises and home users, and what some of the participants on the call, especially those that are non-techies, can be able to do to mitigate against such attacks. You mentioned domain name hijacking, you mentioned DNS flood attacks, you mentioned cache poisoning. I'm sure there are those in our audience that may not be familiar with this kind of attacks, but labda kwa ground they have been attacked, but they did not know which kind of attack it was. It's just the way you run into a mob and you don't know what hit you. So I think because we are moving into understanding the DNS ecosystem more, you may want to break it down to us just to see what transpires. I want to move back to Bob Ochieng. What are the numbers, especially at a global level, when we are looking at the domain name system? To most of our audience or most of our participants, some of them are non-techies. They don't know the difference between a .com and a .ke, or a generic name and a country code name. So what should inform a decision whenever a small and medium enterprise or one of the participants or listeners who has a side hustle and wants to choose a domain name, what should inform their decision? Because we don't just want to say that .ke is good, yet we cannot bring out the value of what is in the .ke. And I'll come back to Joel on that. But what is the picture at global level, Bob, in terms of both the generics and the country codes? Maybe, are we doing this business, or are we just spectators?
Thank you very much, Barak. I think in a short while, we should answer ourselves whether we are spectators or not. From where I sit at ICANN, we believe that all domains or all names were created equally. Today at the global level, the very latest stats from VeriSign, which is available online, gives us an idea of how we are, performing relative to the rest of the world. So the total registrations today across all domain names, and here I mean, the 1,300 plus possibilities of domain names, which I'll discuss shortly. That total registration today is around 360 million, .com, .net, .info, .ke, all those combined. But out of that, if you take the components, the broad components of generic names, and by the way, we need to, just make a note that we have three large components of domain names or types of domain names. We have generic names, examples of .net, .info, .africa, basically names that don't necessarily indicate that you are a territory or a country. And they are normally, 3 letters and above. Then we have country code names, which are normally 2-letter codes, which follows the ISO 3166 standard. These are names that, signify a country or an autonomous entity that has been identified or recognized by the UN for you to get those codes. So examples are .ke, .tz, .za, and you can imagine every country on earth that is autonomous and identified by the UN has those 2-letter codes. And then we have the third category, which is a bit complicated. It's called internationalized domain names, which are either country code names or generic names, but written in non-ASCII script. So to make it easier to understand, we normally write from 0 to 9 in terms of digits, or A to Z. So when you write KE or COM or Africa or NET, you are using letters with either from 0 to 9 or A to Z. But if you can't read that, or you are Chinese or you are Japanese, or you are from Asia or from the Arab world, you can still write in your respective scripts. So we have Arabic, we have Chinese, we have Cyrillic, we have different writing scripts. And they also have a type of domain name that they can write in those writing languages. So you can write .ke in an Arabic form, so that it is not KE, but a representation which is written in Arabic. So we call such names internationalized domain names. So one step back, 3 categories of domain names broadly. Current registrations are at around 360 million domain names globally. Out of that, 150 something plus million is country code names. That is globally. But funnily enough, and if you take those statistics and you take the top 10 of either the country code top level domain names or the global, registrations, not a single African country CCTLD appears in top 10. In the top 10 list by global registrations, we have 6 CCTLDs or country code names. Africa is not there. If you separate CCTLDs by themselves and take the top 10 registrations, again, you will not find a single African country there. So you ask, are we spectators? Are we on the menu? Are we on the table? as far as this business, this chain, this value chain of the internet is concerned. And remember, there are three ways of being on the table. You can be the diner there, or you can be the waiter there, or you can be the food there on that table. How is Africa playing on this business? And I'm talking of Africa, not even Kenya itself. I think we are, largely spectators, by exception of, I would say, South Africa, which today, COSA or Rosede has is at least 1 million domain names, or is at least 1.2, 1.3 million domain names. It tells you the potential. You can look at this as an opportunity or really a poor performance. I think it means we have a very large room to improve. And remember, a properly or a well-performing domain name industry at the national level also has its own chain at the national level. So you have, you'll have a thriving hosting, services, services like SSL. So if we could grow our respective CCTLDs or domain names in our respective countries in Africa, there should be, in tandem, a rise in the ecosystem around domain names and businesses around them. And I think Africa should see this as an opportunity. So today, as we speak, I think we have a chance. And actually, the decision is in our hands, whether we want to remain as spectators or we use this realization to actually make the necessary steps to correct what may not be working well and start looking at the domain name industry as a business and give it the necessary support and attention that it needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. So clearly we are spectators. We are watching those that are on the table and what is on the menu. And speaking of the menu, I've just seen someone saying that we should add Dnssec, domain name security extension, on the menu. So I'll come back to Joel later on to find out how many domain names within the Kenya Network Information Center are actually signed with the Dnssec extension. But Sam Odor is going to tell us what Dnssec, or domain name security extension, is all about. I want to turn to David Njuki to just find out how many IP addresses has Afrinic issued on the African continent. Maybe the number of IP addresses could give us a sneak preview of how well we are doing this business, whether we are spectating and whether we are on the table. And while at it, I would wish that you also speak to the issue of why Africa is the only region that is remaining with IP version 4 addresses, while the rest of the world has transitioned to IP version 6. Should this be an issue of concern, or should we adopt the maxim that if it ain't broken, why should we fix it? Over to you, David.
Okay, thank you, Barak. Thank you for that. I think I'll maybe for our attendees, maybe I'll start by breaking down the IPv4, what you've mentioned. So earlier on, we've talked about the internet being a phone book like system. So these numbers, as we know, numbers are finite. They have a start and an end. So when the internet was conceived, there was the IP version 4. So at that time, it wasn't precedented that the internet will grow at the level it has reached till now. So over the years, what has happened is that we are seeing people talking of IoT and all these things. It means like almost every device is going to the internet. So what has happened is this IP version 4 that was being used before, these numbers are being exhausted, because the calculation was like it would not reach a certain point of exhaustion. So as Afrinic, we are the last registry with these numbers. So what does that mean? Does it mean that if the IPs are exhausted, people cannot still go to the internet? No, that's not the case. So over the years, a newer technology was developed, which is now IP version 6. So the difference between IP version 4 and IP version 6 is that your IP version 4, you have your 192.168. It's a notation that we are all familiar with. But now with the newer technology, which is IPv6, it's a different set of calculations. I don't want to get into the technology bit of it, but a simple analogy is that if IPv4 is like a strawberry or an apple, IPv6 is the size of, now to compare, it's like the size of Earth. So you can see how big that is. So that is the breakdown for the IP part. Now, in terms of the IP usage on the continent, I think as a registry, it says a lot that we've reached, I think we're on the second phase of exhaustion. People are coming for these numbers, not only members in our region. There is discussion of doing transfers of some of the IPs we have, because there is demand for these resources across the world. Reason being that as the people who are being on the table as spectators, we've not really caught up with a lot of the advanced technologies that the rest of the world is using. So I think on the continent, what has happened with adoption of some of the newer technologies, I think it has a lot to do with so many things. I won't get into that. We are not really adopting. So we are lagging behind on that side. That's why we are left behind with some of these resources. But this should not stop us from adopting newer technologies. So as a registry, what we've been doing a lot of capacity building in telling people no. Only because you can't get V4, it doesn't mean that you cannot go to the internet or you cannot provide a service. So we push this kind of ideas. So in that sense, the transition bit of it, it's mostly capacity buildings. We reach out to our members. For IPv6, there is no fee for allocation. I know for V4 there is always a location fee. For V6, for our members, they can get it for free. We want them to buy infrastructure to get this thing on the continent. And yeah, that's the bit for the transition part. I hope I've answered your question, Barak.
Thank you very much, David. You keep talking about your members. I think majority of our participants are members of one organization or the other. I'm not speaking about the political ones. So probably you would tell us what this membership means. Is it a KANU member or what? Maybe some of our participants would wish to be the members of this organization. But I'll come back to you. I want to move to Joel. Joel, while you are preparing to tell us how many domains within .ke or Kenya are Dnssec signed, as we prepare to hear from Sam what Dnssec is all about, please tell us, how does the domain name value chain look like in Kenya? You know, as we discuss whether to buy .ke or .com, what is the implication of buying a .ke? Of course, the government has come up with a very beautiful document, a digital economy blueprint or a digital economy strategy. But on the ground, again, things don't seem to be, something is not adding up. Clearly, with 3 million citizens using e-commerce out of a population of close to 56 million, and internet users purported, let me use the term purported because we are still debating whether the numbers are lying or not, of about 20 million people, where is the value? Because probably this is where we may unlock this equation. Over to you, Joel.
Thank you, Barak. That's a very loaded, very loaded question in terms of where the value is. But before I go to that, maybe I can respond to the Dnssec or the domain name security. For KeNIC as an organization, we are signed, we are ready, and we ensure that our systems are ready. Unfortunately, for the marketplace or the community, the uptake is very low. And when we've gone back and asked ourselves the hard questions, we've realized that there are two key things that come out. One, and I think Sam will touch to it in terms of, do people really care about security? or security is not a boardroom conversation. 2, the technical know-how to actually deploy some of these the domain name security solutions. And to that, KeNIC is actually now going to run a series of trainings to be able just to capacity build the community on this very sensitive subject. So just to answer you, the penetration of security is very, very low. And we would want to see a bit more enhancement on that aspect. And KeNIC will be sharing out what they're doing in that space. Now, coming back to the value and the value chain of domain name system in this country, we look at this in 2 ways. And I think this speaks to the conversation today about the digital economy. We run a 3R model. Now, what does a 3R model mean? We have the registrant, which is the person who owns the domain name. The person, so again, if I use the example maybe of Safaricom, Safaricom is the owner of the domain name. So safaricom.co.ke is the owner. That's the person we call the registrant. We have an ecosystem of registrars. These are the people we as KeNIC has accredited to be able to sell and to sell domains on our behalf. Let me not use the word sell, but to push domains into the market. So we use registrars, and at the moment KeNIC has 200 plus registrars who are accredited to actually go out there and sell these domains. Then the 3rd R is the registry, which is KeNIC, and our role is to ensure that back-end infrastructure is consistently up and running and ensuring that any one point you're able to get onto the internet. I think Sam alluded to a scenario of his friend and saying if we shut down DNS, people would still be on the internet. That's where we play. If our services went down, I'll give an example. If our services went down today and we could not give you the domain name service, as a company like Safaricom would not be able to give you the services that they are giving you. So when someone says we can shut you down and still continue, I think that's a debate that we would want to take and have that conversation. But as KeNIC and ensuring that safaricom.co.ke is 100% active, it ensures that you, the Mwananchi, is able to get your M-Pesa services, you're able to get all other things happening because of the domain name system. So it's critical infrastructure that we handle, and we ensure that this critical infrastructure is always up and running. Now, you asked a question about value. We look at value in different terms. We look at value one, as I mentioned earlier, when someone is searching and they're searching on the net, they're doing their Google searches. If you have a Kenyan country code, it's easier for someone to locate you, someone to know where you are. When it comes to professionalism and credibility, when you have a .ke domain name, someone knows that this is actually an email coming from a credible organization. And further to that, that organization has given emails that are of their staff. I know there has been a conversation in the public domain in the last few months around, for example, government using Gmails to communicate. Now, that has brought some bad blood within the community where people are saying, how can an official of government use a Gmail to communicate to us? They should actually be using the government assigned Gmail addresses, which is the .go.ke. Now, what does that do for you? One, if that individual, and this can be in any organization, not only government, if that individual leaves the organization, if they are communicating with you on Gmail, they have gone with the information. If it was the office email address that they were using, then you have historical knowledge and you have a database of all those communications. So it's important that people ensure that they're using official communication for official business. So I think in that way, then the professional email and the official email makes sense to everyone. The other bit I look at is support. One of the value adds is by having the registry in country, any registrar, any registrant can either walk in, call us, write to us, and we'll be able to give them responses within the shortest time possible. If today you are looking for some support from .com, that particular ticket would be pinged across some servers around the world. But here you have the support online, you have the support in country, you can call us at any time, you can walk in, and if you have a dispute, again, you have a team that can actually help you. The last value proposition for me before I hand over back to you, Barak, is patriotism. We are proud of our country. When our athletes, and we are hearing the national anthem, we are seeing our athletes winning, our logo of, most of us now wear bracelets with our colors. We are happy that we are Kenyans. But on the other hand, why are we not happy to be Kenyans on the internet? Why do we want to be known under different names, under different aliases, and under different connotations that don't actually show who you are? So for us as KeNIC, we are here because we believe in the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya mantra, which means that you are getting a localized identification, which is unique to you, it's unique to your country, and it ensures that out there on this wide world web, everyone knows you're a Kenyan, trading as a Kenyan. Barak, you mentioned something about numbers, and Bob has alluded to that, and David as well. If I look at the numbers from, I think Bob had mentioned VeriSign, we have 1.3 billion Africans. We only have 3 million domains. Really, I don't even know what percentage that looks like. I don't think my calculator will be able to give me the number of zeros before the percentage comes. And why is this? In Kenya, as you've mentioned, we have 57 million as per the census, probably about 20 million who are online, but we only had, as of today, we only have about 102,000 domains. So again, that penetration is less than 1%, both at Africa level and at in-country level. So that is a concern that we are trying to address, because the ecosystem, and if I'm allowed to come back, I'll show how the ecosystem actually makes sure that this economy is actually growing. So if you look at the numbers, we are not doing well. And as Boba said, I think we are the food at the moment, and we are being eaten. So how do we change that perception? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for those interesting statistics. I would like to shortly transition to our audience to give them an opportunity to ask questions or to add to the conversation as we move along. I know there are many experts on the ground who could add to this conversation in different perspectives, especially the registrars and even registrants that have connected who have some concerns to our eminent panel here. So to Sam, I'll come back to you. I had a few questions about some of the common attacks on domain name holders, basically those with small and medium enterprises, those that are running their side hustles, and home users. You had mentioned earlier domain name hijacking, domain name flood attacks, and cache poisoning. Maybe it would be good you just break down for us, because not all of us have that key interest in security issues. And while at that, I would also like to request you to break down for us what is Dnssec, or domain name security extension. I know Joel has just said that very few domains are actually signed locally. That is in the .ke space. And is there value in signing our domain names? Ama tuko sawa. Let me put it that way. You know, I like the fact that many of us lock our houses, but our websites don't have padlocks. They are just open. So maybe just help us to understand this, because I know among us in the audience, there are those that are selling these domain names to mama bogas out there and people that want to connect online. But we need to be equipped when we are guiding them. Should they add a padlock to their website? Over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Barak. Trying to break down with the simplest terms to layman. Security, as I spoke about, is something that people never take seriously. They say once bitten, twice shy. And you'll all agree with me, unless you experience a security event whereby your wallet is stolen or you are attacked in the streets, you will never take security seriously. Now, this is what makes it more technical in the cybersecurity domain. A lot of people, a lot of entities do not know whether they have been breached or whether they have been breached or not. And this makes this subject very complex. For your information, I work for Dimension Data. I know you guys are aware that Internet Solutions in June 15th this year rebranded to Dimension Data. And we are one of the guys who offer world-class security products, not vendor-based particularly, but we look at it holistically to your customized or tailored needs. And we do analysis in regards to the cybersecurity landscape and the likely threat vectors that can be perpetrated on organizations. And also from a KeNIC perspective, we have quite a lot of data in regards to the breach that is happening within our boundaries. And you know, the internet is a global community. So I wouldn't only talk about Kenya, because if I talk about Kenya, I'll be limiting the impact of cyber attacks. Remember, not all people are targets, like the end goal. But in Kenya, what I've witnessed is most people are being used as launching pads to attack other people. So we have a lot of people within secure infrastructure within our borders, and someone probably from South America would hack into a system in Kenya to get to a system in Eastern Europe or anywhere else. So security is not something that people take seriously. And for this reason, according to Cybercrime Magazine, it is predicted that the annual budget for cybersecurity is going to hit $6 trillion. I know one of the biggest spending and one of the biggest impacts for cybersecurity, the cost has been about $4 billion. And when you speak about this in terms of monetary, people tend to gain a more better perspective and understand that. So coming into Dnssec, the name Dnssec, the acronym, it means Domain Name System Security Extension. And what this entails is it's about adding a code or a signature to protect your domain name. And this is normally added on what we call the resolver servers. And what is a resolver server? To break it down to people, if you're going to google.com, that google.com has to be converted into a language that computers understand. And this is what we call translations. Now, cache poisoning is whereby someone injects a malicious IP address and embeds it to google.com. So talking in layman time, we can know that maybe google.com is located at KICC in Nairobi. But now someone cheats you and tells you that the direction to google.com is not KICC. The direction to google.com is maybe Westlands. And now what is the impact of that? When you go into Westlands, you will be presenting your personally identifiable information. And this is what hackers can leverage to actually steal data from you. And this subject now takes us back to the different kinds of DNS attacks that are happening. But holistically, remember, every single hacking, be it a malware attack, a virus attack, a ransomware attack, all these are always interconnected to the domain name system in a very big way. So what is cache poisoning? As I explained before, KICC is not the location for google.com. The location is Westlands. False. So when you go to Westlands, your information has been stolen. And the impact of this is people can be able to steal your login credentials. Imagine you're doing internet banking and someone is able to log in to your internet banking. They'll definitely know how much money you have. They can check your statements. They can get to know a lot more information from you because they'll be having your password. Or maybe you go to something like Amazon.com and you are doing your shopping there, and someone told you that Amazon.com is not KICC, it is Westlands. You go to KICC, you show them your credit card details, the number, the CVS code, and your name. Now, people can steal all your credit card money. And trust me, when you try doing forensics to try and recover your money, it will take a very long time to recover your money from a bank because they have to do forensics. They have to ascertain that you are not the one who was using your credit card and you've come back in pretense to them so that you can steal from them and stuff like that. So there will be a lot of man-hour lost, and in the process, contributing to the 6 trillion that we are projecting for 2021. The second attack that I would like to talk about, it is TCP SYN flood attack, which uses a 3-way handshake. And in this case, people try to send malicious requests to your DNS server. And in the process, it becomes unavailable and it stops responding to connection. So what is the impact of this? We've seen that e-commerce is being done on the internet. Now, if a DNS server like maybe google.com DNS, Google server DNS 8.8.8 or .4.4 open DNS server is to be subjected to TCP SYN flood attack, this will mean that you are not able to conduct transactions. And looking at our industries today, the hospitals rely on DNS. The aviation industry relies on DNS. And I've seen in hospitals where doctors perform an operation and they are being aided by someone who's probably in the United States or someone who is in India, most common in Kenya, to help them perform that operation. So take, for instance, that the DNS is attacked in between while those instructions are being given. This can be a matter of life and death, right? So this shows you how important the DNS system is to our ecosystem. There are other attacks like DNS tunneling attack, which entails exfiltration of data. There is what we call DNS hijacking, which can also lead to hackers acquiring your username, password, credit card information, and stuff like that. We are so used to M-Pesa, where people tell you, tuma kwa hii number, when you are just maybe about to make a transaction. So this also applies to DNS, whereby if someone does a DNS hijacking, you can send money to the wrong account number, or you can wake up in the morning and you find that your bank account has been wiped and stuff like that. The other attacks, which are a bit more technical for a technical audience who might be interested in researching more, there is what we call the NX domain attack. And the impact of that, it leads to slower response of the DNS service. And this in turn can affect services. Like I said, if an operation is being conducted, if we are having a similar conference like the Zoom, and right now with the pandemic, I think everything is online. And even this conference, if the DNS servers that we are relying on was to be attacked, then obviously it's going to have an impact onto this kind of platform that you guys are using. The other attacks like the phantom attack, whereby they send too many outstanding queries and exhaust your DNS, also leading to slow response of the DNS servers. I will go on and on talking about these forms of attacks and everything like that, but allow me to divert and tell the audience ways in which they can prevent these kind of attacks. It's very important to have experts who've invested time, budget, and skills into cybersecurity. You know, you cannot tell everyone to do ABCD and you expect that they are going to get the right results. We are all experts in different fields. So by consulting cybersecurity professionals, for instance, a company like Dimension Data, they can be able to conduct what we call a vulnerability assessment or a penetration testing assessment to try and find out what you are vulnerable to as far as DNS is concerned. And arguably, as I said before, all cybercrime, all internet-related attacks have a big connection to the DNS itself. My 2 cents. Over to you, Barak.
Thank you very much, Sam, for that interesting and educative feedback, especially on Dnssec and the domain name system. I want to move to our audience at this point in time, mindful of the time that we have. I'll come back to the panelists. I can see there are a number of questions in the room, but it would be good to hear some voices from the audience as well. Do we have anyone that would wish to ask a question or make a comment? You can raise your hand in the room. I think I'll give a minute just to make sure that the opportunity is there. I think listening to Sam speak, I'm just thinking that the only time we get concerned of security of the DNS is during elections, when one organization called IEBC is under threat. Otherwise, even when our money is at stake, we don't seem to be concerned with the DNS. And maybe we need a bit of a change of heart in that. I'm just looking at the room. Anyone that would like to have the floor for a question or a comment to contribute to this discussion? Or maybe our audience participants don't know where their hand is. That could be the only other reason why I'm not seeing raised hands. Anyway, let me move to the Q&A pod as I wait for participants to engage. Yes, is that Joe?
I see a hand up from Tony, but it was up from a long time ago. I'm not sure if he's still there. Can I allow him to talk? We see if he still is interested. Tony, we've permitted you to talk if you're still there. Okay, I think you can just continue.
Okay, thank you very much for that. It can only be that our panelists are really breaking down the conversation in an easy to understand manner. There's a question from Cyrus Mbitau. Do we really have a local IP version 6 DNS servers in Kenya? I believe this question is to David Njuki. We have another question from Victor Wangai. My name is Victor Wangai, I'm an IT student. My question is directed to Sam. What are some of the simple ways to implement security measures that can protect a simple home user or small business owner within the DNS system? That's quite a good question. Let me see. I see a comment from Frederick Wahome. This works for us. We have a generic top-level domain website that can be accepted globally, and local country code top-level domain, mostly for emails and website as well. So maybe we can take these two questions, Sam and David, as we wait for the audience probably to ask more questions. I can see there are some questions that have already been answered, but over to you, Sam, and then David.
So I'll take on the question for home users. And I think most home users are vulnerable because you will find that they are obviously not as tech savvy as corporations that can employ an IT guy and stuff like that. And my presumption is a bigger chunk of home users are using wireless devices. And most of these devices, you'll find that they have default configurations that they were given to them. Security is not something that you can tell someone to do one thing and you guarantee him that he's 100% secure. I think within the security professional, the best guarantee you probably ever give someone is 80, 90%. And this is to make it very difficult for someone to infiltrate their system. So for home users, the basic stuff, like having an antivirus on your machine or on your phone, goes a long way in ensuring that security objectives are attained. If you have that wireless device, ensure you change the default SSID that comes with it. Maybe you can hide it. It will make it a bit difficult for hackers to go through, but as we know, when you're conducting wireless attacks, you can even discover the wireless SSIDs that are hidden. So make sure you use a strong and unique password for your wireless devices, and also for your laptops and any device that you are connecting to. Turn off any wireless devices, turn off any Bluetooth devices that could be used as a platform to get into your home network, and try invest into a secure router. I won't mention some routers, but I think having a proper investment on a router that has proper security is something that is key. Ensure you change these passwords regularly. Change the default IP addressing for that router from traditional 192.0.0, 192.168.0.1. Maybe you can use a different addressing system if need be. You might need to turn off DHCP and use static IP addresses. And this can ensure that anyone who maybe hacks into your Wi-Fi device, or anyone who manages to get the password, is not able to be assigned an IP address or something like that. And you need to ensure that your laptop is up to date. The updates are very critical. Microsoft has got patches that they release quite often. Ensure that it is patched up. Ensure your antivirus is up to date. And if you're working from home and connecting to the office, ensure you have a strong VPN connection with multi-authentication enabled on it. And even the router software itself that you're using, ensure that it is up to date and stuff like that. And in most cases, you can find that you can consult somebody and pay them very little money to ensure your devices, your routers are updated, your IP addresses are changed. There are firewalls that you can invest in. The Windows has an inbuilt firewall that is quite powerful, and people assume. If you're a home user, try and leverage on that Windows firewall system. So basically, there could be many more things that you could do, but in a nutshell, I think those 10 points are key things that I can observe.
Thank you very much, Sam. David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Barak. Okay, the question from Cyrus is, do we really have any local IPv6 DNS servers in Kenya? Yes, we do. Yes and yes. So I would answer your question in two ways. The IPv6 DNS servers as a service, I will look at it in two ways. Your service provider, be it Zuku, be it JTL, be it Safaricom. From our statistics as a regional registry, we do understand that they have IPv6 allocation. So they're utilizing these services in their network. So one way to access DNS is for your service provider to give you that access. And as a registry, we do have a DNS initiative. Let me put aside IPv6 for a bit, if Barak allows this. We do have an initiative in supporting DNS server nodes in different countries. So what we do, we partner with the registry, like KeNIC. We have a budget for setting up services in the region. This is just to make DNS on the continent more resilient. Joel mentioned earlier before about in the back end having a resilient service. So this is where, as a registry, we come in. We partner with the stakeholders to say, now you have your primary service here on the country. We have our infrastructure across the region. We can make you be present across across the region. So we do that in a way to have a resilient DNS infrastructure on the continent. So yes, I'm sure I answered your question, and I hopefully provided more information in that context. Yes. So IPv6 is not any different from IPv4 in terms of operation. It's just that people are resistant to change. So we just need to push this thing some more. Yeah. So we do have a lot of these services running. You might not visibly see them, but they're there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for answering that question. We have more questions on the answer pod. And the first question from Wilson is there a possibility of other nationalities creating a .ke domain without a local presence, and how this can be managed? I believe this question will go to Joel Karobio. We have another question from Lel Kip. What about the downside of localizing products and services? Like, I'm trying to expand regionally to Tanzania, Uganda, or South Africa, and locals there sort of discriminate against my firm because it is seen as a Kenyan outfit. Isn't it more beneficial to use a generic top-level domain than a country called top-level domain? I think Bob and Joel can also weigh into this question. And then there's an anonymous attendee. A great consideration is government interference. Wouldn't a .ke site make it easier for the government to take down or block in the name of security, especially with misuse of Computer Security Act or tyrannical regime? I think, again, I'll request Joel to weigh into this. I know that the government is represented on the .ke board. I'm not sure if this is this would give comfort to the anonymous the anonymous attendee that is asking this question, one of our colleagues, and maybe what are some of the measures that have been implemented to make sure that domains are not taken down. And then again, Victor Wangai says, David said, as a country, we have a few challenges in adapting new technologies, especially in the internet ecosystem. What are some of these challenges? That question goes to David Njuki. So to my panelists in that particular order, if you can react to those questions. And then after that, I think we will have closing remarks from each of the panelists, starting with Joel.
Thank you, Barak. I'll try and I think some of the questions we've tried to address them on the portal, but I'll just refer to them, and I'll refer to Wilson, who was asking about nationalities. And we tried to respond by the fact that if you're a registrant, you can register .ke from anywhere. But as I mentioned, the 3R model, you'll go through a registrar, and the registrar must have a local presence in Kenya. And I think there's been a question or a comment in the chat room where someone asked, is KeNIC considering opening up to international registrars? At the moment, our policy only supports local registrars, and I'll say this is because we believe in the Kenyan ecosystem. We believe in giving Kenyans an opportunity to develop a business model that they can make a living out of. So we want to support local registrars to be able to grow our domain name. Yes, there's been considerations of opening up to international registrars, but I think as we go along, let's first, charity begins at home. So we want to make sure that our registrars have the biggest chunk of this pie and ensuring that they're the ones who are actually making this happen. Two, why have we done it with local registrars? Because we believe within international registrars, then we have capital flight. So if someone registers a domain from, let's say, GoDaddy or something like that, that capital or that funding is out there. While in Kenya, we want the local registrars, by what they pay to us, since we are not for profit, we actually plow this back into the internet ecosystem. And that speaks to another comment that I've seen here where we've been asked, what are we doing about training and growing the ecosystem? So the funds we get as KeNIC is what we use to develop training opportunities. We do internships just to ensure that people are also understanding better this DNS ecosystem and being part of it. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 200 registrars, and within those 200 registrars, we probably have another about 500 plus resellers. So there's a business in the domain name system. People might not think so, but there's actually a business. You can actually make a living out of the domain name system. So this is another benefit as to why KeNIC and the registry is located in the country, and we have a specific .ke domain name that we work with. Kip has asked about having a domain name in a different jurisdiction. Yes, that may be a challenge because then you may want to look global. But what we want to say is, yes, you may want to have a .com because you're operating in Tanzania, Uganda, and maybe Zambia. But we encourage that you also secure your local domain in that country. The reason being is, one, if you don't secure it in that country, someone can actually mirror your work. Two, with your website developer, you can actually point back your servers back to your localized domain name within your country. So we are not saying that it's not good to have a GTLD, but make sure that even if you have that within the country of operation, ensure that you've also gotten the domain name for that particular region. I'll respond to the anonymous, and I think Bob has tried to respond to this. As KeNIC, yes, people may assume that we have the power to bring you down. No, we don't. It's not, we don't have a switch that can actually just put off your domain name. No, there is a process we follow. If there is an issue where government has an issue with a domain name or a website, there is a certain protocol that they must follow before any decisions are made. One, they must approach formally the investigative arms of government, which in this case usually is the DCI. And they'll ask the DCI to investigate issues around that website. The DCI then will reach out to us and just ask us if we've seen any issues with that. And we will respond officially. And thereafter, an investigation will be carried out. We cannot take down a domain without a court order. So within our jurisdiction, there are some steps we've put into place to ensure by the time that decision is made, there are steps and processes. And there has been conversation with actually the owner of that domain to understand maybe what they were trying to achieve or not. So that investigation process is very thorough. And at the point that if we are ever asked to do this, there must be official court documents that have been presented to us to do that. So I would like to say that your .ke is safe. There is no one switch that I can wake up in the morning and switch off some. This is a process that must be followed and a process that is within the laws of the country. So I think there's one more. Is there any other question? Yes, there's a question from Gladys who asks, how do you qualify to sell domains and what is the process? Usually the first step is someone comes in as a reseller who is attached to a more established registrar. And when they build their portfolio of domains, then they can apply to be a registrar. At the moment, we use a criteria of about having 10 or so domains under your portfolio. Before then, you can apply to be a registrar. So there's a process. First, we want to get your feet wet a bit of understanding how to register, how to maintain, how to host. Then when you get that and you see that this is a viable business model, you can then apply to be accredited. After we accredit you, there's one more step, which is the accreditation by the Communications Authority, which is a very simple step because once we have made sure that you have all the documentation in place, then we'll just ask, we'll give you a letter to take to the authority for them to actually accredit you on their system as well. So it's easy. What I'd say, it's a business model that someone should actually think of doing and to be able to actually make a living out of the domain name space. So I think I've answered those. I don't know if there's anything else. Maybe I'll come back. I'll check on the chat as well. Thank you, Barak.
Thank you very much. The other questions, David, you had a question as well?
Yes, Barak. I had a question from, is it Victor? Victor was asking about the challenges in adopting new technologies with regards to the internet ecosystem. So what I was referring to when I was mentioning about challenges, I was looking at the whole region, the whole continent. Some of these challenges are things like infrastructure costs. You would be surprised that there are countries which are only served by one internet service provider. You know, as Kenya, we are really advanced, and we should be thankful. You know, so our internet penetration is really good. But other countries, it's a bit tough in terms of penetration, in terms of not only infrastructure costs, and also in terms of the cost of data to the end user. So these are some of the things I was trying to talk about. Joel has mentioned something about, you know, a switch and shutting down a domain. This is also on the internet side. There are countries who can decide to also shut down the internet. So there are a couple of so many things involved on the continent in terms of challenges. It's really hard to break down into one. So when you look at it as a region, the challenge is still there. But I think as Kenya, it's very commendable where we are. We should be really, really thankful. Some people are suffering out there. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. Bob, you also had a bit of explanation to make as we wind down the Q&A. I see a lot of questions in the chat room, and we've run out of time. We'll try our best as we summarize. Let me request my panelists as we summarize if we can include some of the questions in our closing remarks. Before Bob speaks, I see a question on what are we doing to accelerate research, or rather it's a question to panelists or participants. What are we doing to accelerate research and innovation, which will definitely result to a need for more domains in Africa? And secondly, what is the future of domains or DNS in relation to emerging technologies like blockchain? Maybe, Bob, you may want to touch a bit of that, and then especially on the part 2, Sam can comment on it. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Barak. I think maybe time will not allow us to properly answer all the questions that have been raised. Maybe we can also commit to send written answers if we, you know, any of the participants reaches out directly. I think that should also be allowed. So I'll try to run through very quickly some of the questions, and I believe Joel has also tried to, give some perspectives on some questions. For example, the one from Anonymous on government interference. For me, I think it is straightforward. Ultimately, every organization, and CCTL registries or registrars are organizations, they're corporate citizens. They are incorporated and hence subject to certain, jurisdiction, whether, Kenya, Uganda, Europe. There's a government in which that organization is registered. And as a corporate citizen, you are bound, by the laws of that country. So it is then a judgment call for you who is registering the domain name on which government would you rather want to subject yourself to. Because at the end of the day, every domain name you register will be subject to some government jurisdiction. And that does not mean that the government walks, in one day and tells you to do this. Does that government or does that jurisdiction follow due process? And does the registry and the registrars follow due process? So I think that should be the bigger picture so that government doesn't become the only focus, the only point of decision. We should realize that every entity is actually under certain jurisdiction and they're bound by those laws. And Barry asked a question on the chat room about how do we support, local innovations, local businesses, local startups around the domain name, value chain. For example, hosting services. I would say that Africa, or as Africans, we have, unfortunately, a bad culture, a culture that does not tolerate or even forgive failure. So that if you started a business, hosting, for example, and something goes wrong, then very quickly we'll depart from you. We don't want to be associated with you. We'll move all our businesses. In fact, the solution to your failure is us moving, somewhere else. But in other parts of the world, that failure is what is focused on and addressed and invested on so that you correct it. In other words, they give you an opportunity, to prove yourself while they keep supporting. And by supporting, I mean paying for that service. So until we get to a point where we actually realize that failure is actually a path to success, and we should invest not only as customers or registrants who want domain names, but even as governments, support and invest on these small organizations so that as they fail, we actually keep supporting them. One day, down the road, they perfect their business and they become the trusted organizations of the future. Until that happens, I think we will keep frowning, on local startups and businesses. We don't, most of the time, recognize the fact that even when we, support them, we should not stop demanding the best from them. So the fact that we keep, consuming from them doesn't mean that they have, the latitude to give poor services. We should support while insisting on better services. In the process, they'll have the time to, perfect their art. So I believe we should vote with our pockets to support, African innovations and businesses. I think as part of my closing remark, I would say that one of the things that has always been touted is the fact that, domain names or African names or CCTLDs are expensive. If you look at the internet economy today, mobile phones are growing by the day. We are registering email addresses, they are growing. A number of things are really growing. And we are consuming data, at astronomical levels than before. Most of these things, we pay for them daily or monthly. And we have never said that it is expensive. Now, for a domain name that you pay for once in a year, and probably you pay $10, we think, or we want to say that that is expensive. Yet, these other services in the digital economy that we consume every day, and we pay for more frequently than domain names, don't hit us as expensive. So I think it is a bit unfair to keep saying that African domain names are expensive. I think it is actually the opposite. And I don't think that price is the only element that we should be talking about. So I think we are a bit unfair to the industry, and we also need a mindset change in the way, for example, we view some of these things, from an expensive point of view. You could say that, some services are free without naming any of them, but you and me knows that, nothing is free. I've heard many times people saying that even in Freetown, nothing is free. So if you're not paying directly, it means you're actually paying, using a different manner. You might not just know. So I think expensive is relative, and expensive must be put into proper context. That doesn't mean that we should be expensive, but I think it's an opportunity to recognize the fact and keep improving on it, but also be fair when we are addressing the industry and categorizing it as expensive. I think lastly, as ICANN, I would say that ICANN is here to support. Already we have done a market study on this industry so that we didn't have data before. So if you wanted to invest in the domain name industry in Africa, you didn't know what it is, where to start from, whether there is potential there, whether there is money there. Today, you have a good picture of how the industry looks like. And more of this needs to happen, deeper studies at national levels, at sub-regional levels, to add into, the Africa level study, so that investors and indeed consumers have a very good view of how the industry looks like and the opportunities that it presents. So I think with that, Barak, I want to thank you very much and our viewers for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Bob. Last but not least, Sam. I think we'll give David a minute to give his closing remarks, and then Joel will give a vote of thanks even as he makes his closing remarks. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Barak and team, for having me. As stated in the starting remark, I said, if the internet was a song, then DNS would be the highest pitch. And that's one of my closing remarks as we head towards this moment. I'd like to end by answering two questions. One of them was, how can we protect our domain from spoofing and the aliasing issues? And the second one is, how are we building local capacities in terms of DNS knowledge to the young people? So the first one, I don't expect non-technical audience to know everything about security, because we know cybersecurity is currently at the epicenter of ensuring that services are delivered efficiently through confidentiality, integrity, availability, and arguably non-repudiation. So it's important to consult the experts in cases where we feel we don't have sufficient knowledge. Security is basically about threat intelligence sharing. And we've seen a lot of innocent people who have been arrested as being implicated to have committed a cybercrime because the forensics pointed to them. And us as experts, we know probably their desktops or their laptops or their phones could have been launching pads for committing these attacks. So ensuring your own devices are secure is key, because sometimes justice can work against you in the other way. Very important to note as a company, Dimension Data, we have internship opportunities that's available to our audience who are students from universities and from technical colleges who would like to learn more, not just about DNS, but the whole internet infrastructure, how it works. And to our audience who are doing businesses out here, and probably you don't have internal expertise to know the gaps within your business that could lead to a cybersecurity breach. It is important if you can go to www.dimensiondata.com, check out the services that are offered there, one that suits you. We are one of the businesses that offer that globally in Middle East and East Africa, and also globally through our parent company, NTT. We believe that there's always a service that's affordable for everyone, and even for home users who can leverage on this. That is my closing remarks. Thank you so much for the last 1 hour, 30 minutes. It's been great being here, Barak, and look forward to more interactions like this.
Thank you very much, Sam. Indeed, we are just starting when we are finishing. We might need another opportunity to do justice to this conversation, because the questions are really flooding in right now. If I may use, it's a DNS attack on us just when we are about to conclude. So David, as we wait for Joel to give us a vote of thanks, and probably he can also let us know whether we can extend this session in future.
Okay, thank you, Barak. I think mine will be very brief. I'll go back to Bob's analogy of the data table. I think it's a challenge to all of us. I think let us stop being spectators. I think we really need to be, if anything, we need to even own the table, you know. So this is a challenge that I pose to all of us. I think there is a lot of capacity to be built in this sense. As a registry, I will look at it from Afrinic's perspective. As a registry, sometimes it's we struggle to say our position in this domain name ecosystem, but we are very, very important in that. And I think forums like this they help have a broader view of users, to have a broader view on how the whole internet ecosystem works. So I would thank everybody who organized this. I'm thankful. I know I was pulled in last minute, but I think it's been very productive, and I'm looking forward to more discussions. I think we need to keep this going. So yeah, thank you everyone, and also to the attendees.
Thank you very much, David. You have said that we actually need to own the table. We not only need to be on the menu or to be at the table. And I think Joel is the owner of the table, the custodian. So I think in his closing remarks, he needs to tell us whether we are able to purchase or to own this table, or whether we are still dreaming. Joel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barak, David, Sam, Bob. Yes, this table is it's easy to own, if I may say so myself. It just takes the commitment from each and every one of us to say, I want to be part of this ecosystem. I want to own a Kenyan domain name. And for those of you who are visiting us from other countries, pick up your country domain name. It is your identity. It is your identity online. It is what people will know you on. If we make those numbers count, I'll give, we had a conversation one day with Barak and we were saying, look at Safaricom today. I think 30 plus million subscribers. Those are 30 million names. Those are 30 million numbers that can be 30 million names. You as an individual can also get a name. It does not mean that it's only a company name or an institution. Even you can identify yourself. For example, I have joel.me.ke. That is my identity. That is what I want to put on my profile so that people, when they Google, they'll find me through my Kenyan domain name. I know a lot of us use LinkedIn as our profile platform, but you can actually create your own web pages. Yes, and those are the ones that you use. These days, CVs are going digital. So if someone calls me and tells me, Joel, won't talk to you, I tell them, check my profile. That is my CV. I don't have to send you paperwork anymore. And I've put all my information there, but that is on my domain name. So again, someone asked, where is this domain name and this ecosystem going? It's going more and more digital. Today, all of you required an email address to log in into this webinar. I'm sure if I did the statistics at the back, 90% were Gmail, but you could actually have registered using a different kind of domain extension or a professional email. So this is what I'm just asking, that as a country, as individuals, let us now embrace these domain names. Let us embrace the need to be identified as Kenyans. Let us be proud of this as we communicate, and let us be able to then help this ecosystem grow. There was a question that was asked, which I want to respond to, Barak, if you'll allow me, which was around, someone asked me if they can buy domain names and sell them at a premium. I frown on that, but it happens. It's actually very big business globally where people buy and resell, but we want domain names that are being used every single day, because a domain name is your communication platform. So the gentleman who asked that question, just don't buy to keep them, but use them when you can. In my closing remarks, be proud of Kenya, be proud of your domain name, be proud of your country code. Purchase it, use it. Boba said, when you look at costs are not high. If you're talking about $10, that means that's $1 a month. That's 80 bob. Or 100, okay, maybe the dollar is at 115 now. That's 115 bob a month. I'm sure your favorite beverage costs much, much more than that. So if you're paying 115 shillings a month, definitely this is something that is a unique identifier to you. So it is affordable if you break it down in terms of what you want to use it for. So affordability, it depends on what you want to use it for, and then you can use it. Last but not least, Barak, you asked me just to make some closing remarks. Mine is just to thank everyone today who managed to log in for the one, and I think now we're going close to 2 hours. We don't take this for granted, that this afternoon you've given us the time. And I'd also like to thank the people in the back, which is we have an agency that helps us put these communications together. That is Survey, and the team is extremely professional in what they do and ensuring that these webinars are of the world class that we want it to be. As Sam has clearly put it, Dimension Data has solutions for you. Call them today. Some, I've seen you've put links there. Expect a few calls and let them help you get your online security done and even getting yourself online. Dimensions Data is also a registrar, so they can actually get you the domains that you want to register. Barak and the AFTLD team, these are our African partners. We don't do this in isolation. So we thank you for participating and being our moderator. Afrinic, David and team, this is where we get our names and numbers from. We thank you for the support, and especially I've seen David post a few links around training. For those who can be able to join some of those trainings, this is the time. We have the time now, we are online, so we can actually take some of that on board. To our big brother, Bob of ICANN, thank you again for always keeping us on our toes, always sending us messages to ask us why our numbers don't look so good, and then also supporting us in spreading the message around the domain name system and ensuring that I see the back of your screen says one world, one internet. And I think that is what we should all strive to be, that we are always talking together. And one other person who is very silent, but we always appreciate, is our host, which is the Communications Authority, who hosts us here. And we always ensure that we recognize their input in terms of everything that KeNIC does. So Barak, back to you. And I thank everyone for sparing this afternoon to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel, and all the community members and citizens that have joined this webinar. Indeed, we've not exhausted the subject. We hope that we will have a repeat in the near future, just to tackle some of the issues that we've not been able to tackle. Otherwise, for now, have a great evening, and make sure that you have a .ke. I don't want to say buy Kenya, build Kenya. And if you're in any other African country, make sure you also have a local domain name. We are talking about economics. Let's make sure that our money remains in the country so that we can own the table. We cannot speak of owning the table when capital is flying. For now, goodbye until we speak next time. Thank you very much for joining the webinar.
Thank you, Barak and team. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Next time, huh?
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.